Good morning. This is our second interview with some of the pioneers in the desalination industry. My name is Ian Watson. I'm the Executive Director of the American Membrane Technology Association, and I've known these gentlemen for many years. American Membrane Technology Association is the leading voice in the United States for promotion and use of membrane technology for water treatment, including desalination. And we thought that since most of the people in the industry, and it's a relatively small industry even today, were approaching retirement, shall we say, that it would be a good idea and a benefit to the industry as a whole, particularly the younger people coming along, if we were to try and capture some of the history of this technology and in an archival form. And that's what we're doing. What we plan to do, this is the second chat, as I mentioned. We interviewed some people last year. And what we plan to do when AMTA's new website is up and running, we plan to post clips from these interviews on the website, and hopefully that they'll receive an audience that will appreciate the hard work and efforts that these pioneers made to get the industry to where it is today. So this one is the Envirogenic Systems Company. It was one of the earliest companies in the business in both thermal and membrane desalination. On my immediate left is Mr. Ali Kalantar, who is currently the CEO of Doosan, and I'll let Ali explain how he got from Envirogenics to Doosan.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. I think it's important to talk about some of the things that we have done in our career for the younger generation that are joining our industry. And so again, thank you very much for that. Well, I started my career with DSS, actually. Well, before DSS, actually, after I graduated from college, I joined. I went to Kuwait and worked for Water Resources Development Center. Water Resources Development Center was, in my opinion, one of the pioneers in desalination at the time, because, as you know, Kuwait was responsible for destroying the first MSF plant ever. Kuwait Shueikh F1, 1 MGD plant, was the first MSF ever built in the Middle East. And after that, there were many that were built. So Water Resources Development Center consisted of some of the experts in desalination, including Jim Reside and everybody else, including some of the people that came from United Nations experts, because we used to call them United Nations experts. So I got to, even though my background was engineering and civil engineering, I had no training in desalination in college. As you know, nobody talked about desalination at the time when I went to college. And so I learned all about desalination in Kuwait. And later on, when I came back to the United States, I joined DSS, and DSS was one of the few engineering firms that was involved in desalination. So I got a very good training there as well. Don Hornberg and O.J. Morin and Bill Surratt and Jeff Hart, right, and all of those guys were really people that did a lot for the desalination business. DSS was, of course, also very much involved in Saudi Arabia and did a lot of consulting for SWIC at the time, Selling Water Conversion Corporation. And so it was an opportunity for me, and I met and learned a lot also from the DSS team. Then I got an opportunity to work for Envirogenics. In 1980, I was offered to work for Envirogenics with Cecil Hughes, who was at the time the Vice President of Engineering. He offered me to join Envirogenics as a proposal manager. So that's where I was at. I started as a proposal manager for about 6 years at Envirogenics. Left Envirogenics in 1986, approximately 1986. my last position at Envirogenics was Director of Projects. And then myself and my good friend Hany and Robert Kadach started a business called American Engineering Services. And that business flourished over the years, and we built a lot of plants. You yourself gave us a lot of opportunities, if you remember.
Yes,
one
I
of the
do.
largest. Really, that was, I consider that to be one of the greatest things that you did for AES, because without that plant, we would have never made it. And so I think we built Cape Coral, if I remember.
Yes.
5 MGD, one of the largest at the time.
Yes.
And you had no doubt we could do it. So I want to thank you for that. In 2005, we sold the company, American Engineering Services, to Doosan Heavy Industry. And Doosan asked me at that time to stay on as the Chief Executive Officer, and that's where I am today.
Good.
Still.
Good. Yes, that's. You mentioned some names that will also be part of this series of interviews at some point, I hope.
Right.
So, next to Ali is Kurt Kiefer. As I said, I've known all of these gentlemen for many years. Kurt is currently with CDM. He's a vice president with CDM here in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale. And Kurt, maybe you'd like to give us a little quick resume of your background.
All right. Well, first of all, again, I'd like to thank you and to thank AMTA for inviting us. It's certainly an honor to be here, and I'm glad to be here with my two good friends. Well, I started off, as Ali mentioned, Ali and I were working together at DSS, which DSS, of course, stood for Desalination Systems and Services. And I guess one of the I thought very exciting projects that I was able to work on with DSS was the Algebale Phase 2 project. That was a pioneering effort. That was the largest, it may even still be the largest single desalination complex in the world at the time. I mean, it was so large they had to break it into 4 contracts because there was no firm in the world that could actually construct all of that equipment and meet the contract schedule. And we worked on some other interesting projects in Saudi Arabia. Ali had some fun excursions out to Paris and some adventures. Actually, I got to visit one of the plants that we worked on right on the it was Al-Khafji, which is right on the border of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, just after the Gulf War. And I remember everybody was there with the, it was like noon, and the sky was black from all the oil fields being on fire. And so that was kind of an interesting aspect of my time at that evolved from my time at DSS. And then eventually I moved on. I worked briefly for a company called Aquatic Technologies. We did one of the interesting aspects of that is that they were helping CSI Chemicals get into the market, which later was acquired by BF Goodrich and was one of the major anti-scalant suppliers. And then as luck would have it, I was working with Jeff Hart up in Philadelphia on a project for the Middle East as well, thermal project. And I happened to be talking to Ali on the phone, and he said, Envirogenics has an opportunity we're looking for a proposal manager for the RO part of the business. And so
Come on down.
Yeah, come on down, exactly. And so I had the good fortune to work at Envirogenics for a number of years, and we worked on a lot of interesting projects, worked with a lot of great, hardworking people. As Ali mentioned, a lot of innovations in design occurred at Envirogenics, and learned a lot about the industry and what it takes to be successful. But then actually Stone & Webster acquired DSS engineers, and they made me an offer to come back there, and so I went back to work with DSS, and we worked on a lot of interesting projects around the world, different both thermal and reverse osmosis plants, including the replacement of the desal plants in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. That was an interesting project to get in and out of. And then actually, Bill Surratt, of course, who worked with us at DSS, and actually Bill left Stone & Webster, went to work with CDM, and so Bill had called me and invited me to come to work with him at CDM, and I was fortunate enough to start off with the Boca Raton, the nanofiltration plant for Boca Raton, which at the time was the largest one in the world, and
Still is, I think, isn't it?
I think so.
Still is, yeah.
So, and I'm still having the opportunity to work on a lot of exciting projects with CDM around the country.
Yeah, that was, I remember when Bill started working on that, and I said, how big is it going to be? He said, 40 MGD. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, no. I said, so what are you thinking about doing? He said, well, I haven't quite decided yet, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
So, and next to Kurt, we have Hany Saeed. Hany, I think you preceded these guys at Envirogenics, if I remember correctly. And Hany now is with Bywater AEWT. AEWT is a company that he founded after he left AES. And I think getting a flavor of how this industry works, people seem to pop up in the same place over and over again. And we all seem to remain good friends, even though we have our differences from time to time. But Hany, perhaps you'd like to give us a little bit about your early days at Envirogenics and how you went on from there.
Well, I just want to thank you for inviting me and being among friends here. And I want to say that you had one of the people that you had influence on my career as well. I started with Envirogenics in 1971. I came to the United States in 1969 with my family. And while I was going to school, I got a job at Envirogenics in 1971 as a membrane rolling technician. So I was actually rolling the membranes, and you talk about low tech. I remember having to adjust the glue lines to make sure that when we trim the elements, we don't trim the glue line as well. So we had a lot of fun with that. And later on, I became since I was going to engineering school, I got into the testing of the membranes and the 15-minute wet testing that we all still use till today.
That's right.
And I also got involved with I think it was one of the first gas separation membranes that was rolled in Envirogenics. It was, it was hand rolled, and it was like a 20-inch long. Bob Tidwell at the time was the vice president of engineering for Envirogenics, and after I finished school, he asked me to work in the proposal and application engineering. I consider myself very lucky throughout my career at Envirogenics, because they really, I went around from being a rolling membrane technician to test engineer through application engineer, and having to estimate and still do the projections and the flow by hand, as we used to have to do it. There was no computer programs at the time. And I worked as field service engineer, project manager, and I became the head of the RO group for Envirogenics. And we've done a lot of projects, and I have to admit, till today, I don't think I've found any hard-working group of people that wears anymore Genesis. We worked as a team. There was nothing that we couldn't do. Everything was doable with hard work. I worked with Kurt and Ali. And of course, our boss at the time was Bob Gadash, which I think he had, believe, influenced all our lives in our career, because I don't think I've seen any hard-working person and how the dedication as Bob was. And he was the one that made us believe in ourselves and helped us to commit to each other. So we've all worked as a team together. After the unfortunate situation of Envirogenics, with being shut down, and it was, by the way, because of Cape Coral.
Thank you.
So,
I should say that we will come back to that subject in a
Yes.
minute.
but in 1986, I worked for Envirogenics from 71 to 1986, when Bob, Ali, and myself co-founded American Engineering Services. And that was a turning point, because we said we're going to work together, but we told ourselves, what are we going to do? He said, well, I don't know, we don't know anything else to do except what we're doing, so we better start something. So we started American Engineering, and we had a lot of support from a lot of the people in the industry that believed in us and gave us an opportunity. And you're one of them, Ian. You gave us the opportunity to get even and go back to Cape Coral, which was a turning point in the career of American Engineering Services. I remember I spent, as you recall, 9 months in the trailer
Yes,
in
indeed.
Cape Coral,
Yes,
putting
indeed.
that plan together. But it has been a good experience. The company has flourished and grown quite a bit, and at times, we were all used to be surprised, because this company was founded. It was in a small room next to the kitchen in my house, where we all all three of us met, and we used to work out of there. And all of a sudden, the company became like, an expert in the field. And later on in '91, I departed because I think the business was moving to Florida. So I decided that I would stay in Los Angeles. And in '91, I started Advanced Environmental Water Technology. And again, it was, again, because of the people like yourselves and other people in the industry that believed in us. We start getting jobs and start competing in the municipal field. And of course, the turning point was, for Advanced Environmental Water Technology, was the award of the Boca Raton project, which was at that time huge. And again, I think Kurt was involved in it. But it's amazing how we were lucky that we have people in the industry, really, like Ali said, believe in us.
Yeah, I think
And give us the opportunity.
I think one of the characteristics of the industry, I think, has been the dedication of the people who work in it. And there's some truth to what you just said. Is I've been doing this for 20 years. What else can I do? You could go out and buy a hardware store, I guess, or something like that. But
Wish we would have thought of that.
I should have thought of that. Or a plumbing business. And I think that's why you find the same names cropping up again. I mean, you all worked together, and then you became competitors, and then you worked together, and you did a job that Kurt and Bill Surratt were involved in at Boca Raton, and you've done work for me, and that's the kind of spirit we wanted to capture in these interviews, because I don't see that in the generation that's now coming up. It's just another thing that they do. And I think that some of us, at least I know I feel this way, that we were doing something valuable. We were advancing a technology that was in its infancy when we started, and we've actually benefited a good segment of the world's population who now have a water supply they can rely on because of this technology. And to me, that's gratifying. So let's
just continue on with advanced environmental water technology. We've grown quite a bit. Which I couldn't believe it when somebody told me that we had almost the largest installed capacity in the United States. In 2005, we were approached by Bywater to buy the company. Bywater acquired advanced environmental water technology in 2005, and it's very coincidental that both AEWT and AES were acquired
the same year.
the same year. And it's amazing how you can see that companies that you have started from the beginning is all of a sudden now people talk about it as if it's a brand name.
Yeah.
But the business is still, everybody gets a job or loses a job. I think among us, we're the first to call the others and say congratulations.
Yeah.
And that has been the spirit among all of us. And I wish the younger generation, take on that traditions.
Yeah.
Because it's important for the whole industry that nobody, everybody competes, and whoever gets the job usually is the one that left something out.
So you feel sorry for him.
Call them up and say, well, congratulations. Boy, too bad.
But we always, because of the dedication of the people in the industry, there always been, whether from the OEM, the contractor, or the consulting engineers, or the client, the dedication is, let's get the plant designed properly, let's get it going, okay? And we all, reap the fruits later on.
That's right.
And that's the spirit of cooperation between the clients, the engineers, and the contractors and the OEM.
That's right.
That makes a successful project.
That's right. That's right.
When did Envirogenics actually start?
Well, Envirogenics was a division of Aerojet. Again, I think Aerojet, nobody talks about Aerojet. Aerojet was a defense contractor.
Right.
And they started a division of Envirogenics. And
I think it was before that.
Was
it?
it?
Was BLH.
BLH, okay.
BLH
Okay.
was the original.
And they bought
That's where
BLH.
Envirogenics.
Yeah, that's Baldwin,
came.
Lymer, and Hamilton.
Right.
Right.
They
Yeah.
were the original company.
And they were they not only built locomotives, but they also built some early evaporators, did they not?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where the technology has started at
Yeah.
BLH.
Yeah.
They built like single stage evaporators and
Yeah.
but it was Aerojet that actually put a lot of research and development and came up with lots of ideas as it pertained to multi-stage flash technology and all that. And of course, just the evolution of Envirogenics. Envirogenics later on was sold to a company called Sogex. Sogex was a French company that bought Envirogenics, and Envirogenics became very important when Sogex got the largest job in Saudi Arabia. This was Jeddah 4 project.
Right.
That was 120 MGD.
No, 50 MGD.
Was it 50 MGD?
50 MGD and 500 megawatt.
500 megawatt power plant. And the important thing is that that was a very important project for Envirogenics. Boosted the Envirogenics very high, but also at the end, it was one of the reasons why Envirogenics is no longer in business. So that's basically.
Yeah. I think my first recognition of Envirogenics was when I visited Greater Pine Island.
Yep.
And saw this thing standing there, 2 trains, 4-inch steel vessels, and 2 enormous pumps. I think it operated something like 700 psi or something like that. And I remember thinking at the time, this Envirogenic Systems Company, a division of Aerojet General, and I thought, why is a defense contractor doing this?
Well, one of the things that started Envirogenics in the membrane business originally was a government program to develop membranes, and mainly, and that's where Aerojet comes in, where mainly was going to be used for the lunar landings, okay, to recycle, reuse basic membrane in case of the emergency where the astronauts are caught in space.
Right.
So, I mean, a lot of now we're talking about water reuse and so forth like that as something new. But the original R&D program was to develop membrane for water reuse, for emergency use for the space program.
Now, Pine Island was built in 1975, I think?
74.
74. Did you work on that project, Hany?
I worked on that project. I remember very well we shipped the skids and we were starting up the unit. I was up on the ladder at that time trying to load membranes, and all of a sudden I looked down and there's an alligator on the plants. So I remember I had to stay there for about half an hour waiting for somebody to come because I was afraid to come down. And I think that was the first time in my life that I've seen an alligator.
Yeah, I was out there visiting because we had an intertie across the sound there. And the general manager took me, he said, have you ever seen a white pygmy rattlesnake? And I said, actually, I've never seen a pygmy rattlesnake of any color. He said, well, they're sort of generally about the same color as regular rattlesnakes. He said, but we got some white ones. I said, you do? He said, yeah. I said, where are they? He said, in the lime silo.
Yeah.
So he took me up to the top of the lime silo, and there were these pygmy rattlesnakes that were white, kind of gray color. They had, for some reason they were living up there, and they had changed their pigment to match the environment. I thought they were covered in lime. He said, no, they've actually adapted. So later on, you went back and retrofitted that plant and put 8-inch vessels,
Correct.
fiberglass vessels.
No, they were steel
They were steel vessels also.
Steel
Yeah,
vessels.
steel vessels.
We retrofitted, we put a piggyback on the
Right.
the 4-inch, and we put 8 inches
Right.
steel vessels again. And then later on they were replaced after we developed the FRP vessels. Envirogenics, actually, we designed our own pressure vessels, and then it was built by Spaulding at the time, but we had designed our own pressure vessels, FRP. So we later on replaced them from steel coated vessels to FRP later on.
Right. Yeah, that was, and I think that you gained something like 50% of capacity. They had this massive array of 4-inch vessels, and then I think there were 6 or something like that on top.
8.
8 on top, and it went from 500,000 to 750,000 gallons a day. And I have a very poor photograph of that plant. The light was terrible when I took it, and there's an old camera where you had to have it developed and everything. But it's the only photograph I've ever seen of Pine Island plant. You probably have some.
Yeah, I still have some. At that time, we have taken the job as a GC contractor, so we did all the work and had to install it ourselves. So that was quite an
But
accomplishment.
it was as a result of that when we invited bids for the original RO plant in Sanibel, Envirogenics was one of the companies that was invited. And I remember Ted Schoonmaker and Bob Tidball came down to talk to me about the project. and that was in 1977 or 78, I guess. And for some reason, your price was very high compared to, not as high as Polymetrics, but it was a high price. And I asked later on, I asked Larry Mayfield, who at that time was the CEO of Envirogen. I said, "Why was your price so high?" He said, "Well," he said, "we had some experience at Pine Island, and that part of Florida is not a very good place to do business." He said it's very difficult to get any supplies. If we forget to send something, somebody's going to have to drive 100 miles to get a 2-inch fitting. So we put some risk money in there. I said, you put a lot of risk money in there because you were, way over the price of the other guys, except for Polymetrics. So, but that was, and then later on, we all got together and did the Cape Coral thing.
Right.
And that was a low part of my career because I really thought you guys should have got that job. And if it wasn't for the lawyers, you would have got that job.
Yep.
So that was. But you did come back as AES and get some retribution.
I think
Yeah.
we redeemed ourselves.
Yeah, you redeemed yourselves. That's right. That's right. That's right. A lot of the work that you did at Envirogenics was overseas. And when you were there, the conditions in the Middle East weren't what you would call luxurious. I can remember when I went to work for Hydronautics, I used to go down there and periodically I'd bump into Bob Kadaj at the airport or on the airplane, and he was invariably going to where I was going because there was a proposal coming out or an RFP coming out. And he had the advantage, of course, he spoke Arabic, and I didn't. So I don't think, the time that I was at Hydronautics, I don't think we ever managed to beat Envirogenics on a project in the Middle East.
I think really speaking about Envirogenics and the success of Envirogenics can be heavily attributed to Bob.
Yeah.
Bob Kadaj was there was no country that he would avoid to go to. And unfortunately, I had to tag along. Given 48-hour notice, Ali, you're coming with me. Where are we going now? So we used to travel together quite extensively, and we went to. We did a lot of work in the Middle East. We built a lot of plants in the UAE, and he would stay there until he sells the plant.
Yeah.
He would stay for months, and he would ask you to stay as well, But he had tremendous business development skills. He would develop these relationships with customers and instill this confidence in them. At the time, people in UAE and Saudi Arabia had very little knowledge of what RO was all about, and we were fighting pretty hard to try to convince them that this is a real technology that they should consider. But he was just a fantastic business development person, and he cherished those relationships, and I think he made a tremendous contribution to this industry. We actually sold, for instance, as an example, the first MSF plant in China.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
We built the first MSF plant in China near Tianjin. It's a power station called Dagang Power Station. Bob and I, in early 80s, spent months in China. I don't know if we have been to China now. China was not what it is now. We went in there when they were still wearing the Mao clothes at the time. And
Remember the hotel?
yeah, and we stayed in hotels that were under, and Bob always did things low profile way.
Yeah.
He never stayed in a 4- or 5-star hotel. And the reason was, we have to be low profile. I don't want competitors to see where we are. So we went to China, and I remember the first time I went to China for that project, I went to the front desk, and it was myself and another Envirogenics employee, and I said, please give us 2 rooms. And they said, 2 rooms? Why? I said, well, there are 2 of us. I said, no. We give you only 1 room and you stay in the same room. And we had to negotiate to get 2 rooms. And, the country was totally different at the time. But, we, as I said, we built the first desalination plant for Dogon Power Station. We spent a lot of time down there, months there, and that plant is operating. I think as far as traveling to overseas was concerned, there was just no issue at all.
Yeah.
Get on the plane and go there and spend months there and get the project and come home.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and in those days, the market was developing here for RO. There was no thermal work to speak of in the States, so if you were going to do thermal work, you had to travel. And even the RO market here was relatively small in those. I mean, I can remember, I thought half MGD was a big plant.
And, I think our task at the time was much harder because we also had to educate the customers.
Yes.
We developed the projects from scratch, and we spent a lot of time explaining to them what this thing does, explaining to them what an MSF plant is, and instill that confidence in them that this is a plant you need to buy. Because it was very important. If you're building a power station, you need the water. Without the water, that power station is not going to run. So that's the kind of thing we needed to do, and that's why it took a long time to actually get the project from start to the finish and actually get a contract signed.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any lawyers at Envirogenics. We didn't have any guys that would review this and review that. Bob and I used to just review everything, do the contracts, negotiate everything, and send it to Herb Slager at the time, was the president of Envirogenics. And Herb said, oh, okay, that's fine, go ahead. It was a lot of daring things that we did, but
Yeah, one of the everybody has 20/20 hindsight, but I don't know if you remember, I think it was last year at the show in San Diego, one of the pressure vessel manufacturers had an up-to-date replica of the old Ras Al Khaimah multiple element, multiple vessel.
That's the mega vessel.
The mega vessel,
Yeah.
right,
And,
right.
Actually, Mega Vessel is a company that actually my son is the one that's started it. But we actually Mega Vessel built. We have 3 in operation right now.
Really?
1 in Singapore and 2 in Japan.
Yeah.
And I think there's another one that's about to go to Fujairah in Dubai.
Yeah, it was interesting. What, Kurt, when you were at Envirogenics, you got the opportunity to visit some of these remote outposts where Bob Kadaj was dragging the company to build things. Do you have any anecdotes you'd like to share with us about, sharing?
Yeah, I think one of the funnier things is that we frequently would go to United Arab Emirates, and we would work on proposals. Of course, at that time, when you worked overseas, you had to have a local partner, and a certain percentage of the contract had to go to the local partner. So we would prepare the design for all the desalination equipment in the U.S., and then we'd have to go and meet with our local partner and negotiate the price. We had to. We were always working on getting our price down to the lowest, but then Bob would always start working on the local contractor and trying to get his price down to, squeeze every last penny out of his price to make sure we could be competitive. And I remember, at those times, like Ali said, that you had to do a lot in your proposals. You had to do a lot of education for the people. So we were putting together these proposals that were about, one volume was about this thick, and sometimes we'd have to submit like 10 sets.
10 sets, and every page has to be initialed and signed.
And so we were kind of working in this little office that was kind of like a garage, really, in Al Ain. And I remember that to make all of those sets of documents for submittal, there was a T-boy that had to take the pages one at a time, put them on the old-fashioned Xerox machine, close the lid, press the button, go to the next one. And every half hour he had to stop and go around and make sure everybody had their coffee and their tea, and then come back and make more copies.
Yeah, I remember I used to carry 4 or 5 suitcases of documents to our head office in Paris, Sojex's head office in Paris. And I really, it was because, and nobody would meet you at the airport, so you're walking 5 or 6 of these things and trying to find a taxi and put everything in there. One taxi would not take all those documents, so you would be 2 taxis, and one taxi would only carry the documents. And then you take it to the hotel, carry it upstairs, and it was unbelievable. And remember those days at Sojex's office?
Yeah.
Well,
it
it used
was
to
right
take
near the Champs-Élysées, actually.
it used to take a long time to put together a proposal because it was, everything was done on a typewriter. And if you made a mistake, you had to retype the whole page.
Right.
Because a lot of the clients, if you put the whiteout on it, they thought you were trying to pull a fast trick on them, so they wouldn't accept it. So,
I think those days when we used to put a proposal, I think we almost had to really do a complete design.
Yes.
Because we had to price in the building, we had to price in the civil works and all that stuff.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I remember
and to
when
be able to convince the client, I mean, I remember I was with Bob in Abu Dhabi one day, and we got a call from somebody that used to deliver water to the offshore platforms. And he said, well, the tanks are getting contaminated because one time they transfer oil, then the next time on the next go around they put water in the tank, and we sat down and Bob, all of a sudden Bob said, we got to come up with some concept and stuff like that. So and we came up with a proposal to put a desalination plant on a barge, and we Bargenic sold the first barge-mounted desalination plants. And another job, there was a pipeline to be built, and they needed to move the crew throughout the pipelines, and we started having to think out of the box somehow, and we started building a containerized RO that is housed in a shipping container. And it was like, you're always constantly trying to think out of the box to get water to people.
Right.
And
Well,
our idea was when we start up plants, the plant would be shipped inside of a container, and we get there, and I remember Bob was training me on the first startup of an RO plant. And we got there, they put us in a car, drove like for 2.5 hours in the middle of the desert, and then I looked around, there was absolutely nothing except a small Bedouin town that we were installing the plant in, and so we had to unload the container was there already, and we had to take the equipment out, and that was our sleeping quarters inside the container. Luckily, the plant came with air conditioning, so we had to get a welder, and we cut a hole inside the container, put the
air conditioner in.
But and Bob was so worried. He said, well, they might not accept this air conditioning, they're going to make it used now. And I said, well, either they're going to accept a used air conditioning, or they're going to have 2 bodies sent back to the States, because it was 44 degrees C, and you're sleeping inside of a container in sleeping bags.
Steel box.
Yeah. So it was quite an amazing challenge, having to be always creative, and I think that's where all we got it from.
That's right.
And made us successful when we started working on our own.
you did, as I recall, Envirogenics did a couple of the early seawater RO plants in Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely.
Was Al Kafji and Umluj, was it?
No, it was Duba and Hackle.
Duber and Hackle, that's
And
right.
I remember that very well, because we had a healthy competition within Envirogenics among the people that were working on the MSF side and the RO side. There were people that were pushing MSF, and and the reason for it, because was very little knowledge of RO at the time among that group. But we did Duban Hakel in Saudi Arabia, one of the first seawater RO projects, both ways, MSF and RO. And I remember that we took the proposals down, and we were talking about 20 suitcases of material. This was for SWIC. And I remember Bob, myself, Herb Steiger, and a few people from the Sojix office spent at least 2 or 3 months down on site. At the time, Sojix was building this big, huge facilities for the Saudi Defense Ministry. And we took one of those villas, and we stayed there and negotiated those projects. And it was decided right there in Saudi Arabia on site that they wanted this to be a seawater RO installation.
Really?
With Assam Jamjoon.
Yeah.
If you remember Assam
Yeah,
Jamjoon?
remember Assam?
Yeah, and I never forget those days where they would call us in, SWIC guys would call us in, and would have to stay outside the governor's office for 3 hours. You know, they would give us an appointment to be there like 5 o'clock, and they would see us at 8. And we would get in there and negotiate the projects. And then they wanted this and they wanted that. We would go back to the villas and work all night. And the next morning, they would not tell you what time they would need us the next day. So we had to wait to get a call. And they would call you and say, well, be here at 11. So now we had worked until 6 a.m. in the morning. And it was unbelievable. But it was a wonderful thing that we were able to get those jobs. And I think Duban Hakel is still running.
Yes, it's one of the most successful seawater plants in Saudi Arabia.
That was a two-pass plant.
It was a two-pass project.
Yeah.
Everybody was at that time, those days, were pushing for a single pass.
Right.
Okay, and with the DuPont system operating at 1200 psi and so forth like that, we decided, because in Varjak we didn't have a seawater membrane. Okay, we only had the CA membrane still. So we designed it around Toyoba, and Toyoba was a CA membrane. And I remember Toyoba did not even know how to design a plant.
Right.
They knew how to produce membranes. And I remember it was one of the first seawater membranes, first pass, that operated in a two-stage arrangement.
Really?
Yeah,
Didn't know
to be
that.
able, because they just didn't know how to use the hydraulics and the low brine rates,
Right.
flow rates and so forth like that. And we decided, based on their information, we designed it based on a two-stage.
Were you still there then, Kurt?
Yes.
Yes, he was
yeah.
involved in the preparation of proposals.
We were all working together, and it was like, it was, I mean, we used to sometimes just even spend the night in the office, work all night long. Because it took Bob,
They were feeding us a lot of
Winning.
information from the United States, so
Yeah.
we were staying there and getting
Yeah.
information from them.
Yeah.
And I remember, when it got to a point where I really wanted to go home, and I think Bob Kadach had converted Herb Steiger to be like him. And Herb said, "Let me make this very clear, Ali. You're not going home until we get this thing signed. Okay? Thank you very much."
that was, I don't think anybody, you go to the office and, as well, my wife Merva would have the suitcase always ready, because you never know when Bob
That's right.
is going to give you a call, says you could be in the office and you could be on a flight at 2 o'clock or 3
That's right.
o'clock in
That's
the
right.
evening. And actually everything was done in hand and didn't have computers. And Bob was always looking for an edge. And I think until Kurt came in, when we had a little bit of a discipline, as far as because Kurt documented everything. We had to jump from one thing to another. But Kurt, I think, brought the discipline to the group, and then documentation and so forth, like something that we didn't really have at Envirogenics, him coming from the consulting side of the business. So he brought a really a discipline to all of us, and kept us all, and always had to negotiate the number of engineering hours. Bob always, no matter what you give Bob always wanted to slash it by half.
Well, I think we could probably sit here for another hour or two and reminisce, but I wanted to thank you all for coming, and It's been very enjoyable for me. As I said, I've known all you guys for a long time, and in spite of that, we're still friends. And you've all done very well in your chosen fields, and I wish you continued success. And thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That concludes our second chat with the pioneers, and we'll move on to number 3 in about 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.